Well, my name is Megan Schrader. I am on the AWS public policy team, focusing mostly on state and local public policy here in the United States. But we're really excited to bring you a panel of representatives from all levels of government from around the world to talk to you about cloud first policy. I think some of the most exciting parts of the public sector summit is hearing about the many ways that public sector entities are transforming the way that they deliver services for the betterment of their constituents. But sometimes initiating this transformation isn't always intuitive, and it's not always easy. And often it requires support from multiple levels of government in order to facilitate that transition. Around the world, in places like Bahrain, Singapore, the United Kingdom, Argentina, and here in the US, we're seeing governments take a cloud-first posture. And so we've got some panelists here today to talk about their experience in that path towards IT modernization and in challenging the status quo. So I will give our panelists a few minutes to introduce themselves, talk a little bit about the journey that their specific organizations are on. We'll do some moderator questions, and then we'll open it up to questions from the audience. So I will send it to you, Scott.
Okay, so my name is Scott Levac. I'm the Director of Cloud Oversight within the Office of the Chief Technology Officer for the Government of Canada. Basically, our organization sets the policy direction for IT for the dozens of departments and agencies within the federal government. We also do oversight of investments and of major projects that are IT enabled. We published our first cloud adoption strategy in 2016. It's what we called a right cloud adoption strategy. And basically what we said was CIOs can now use public cloud as part of the IT landscape with the proper risk management in place. This year, we pivoted to a cloud first policy that was published in April. And in that policy, what we said is CIOs must consider cloud as the principal delivery model for IT. And we've updated our adoption strategy, which is going to be published in a few weeks, to further specify that public cloud and software as a service is the priority choice for CIOs. And that private cloud is really for scenarios where there's no commercially viable solution. So that would be things such as, let's say, secret. We're not ready to put that in the public cloud yet. So that's really where private cloud would fit in. In December 2017, we put in place contracts with hyperscale providers. And those contracts are open to any federal department and agency. It is currently restricted at the unclassified level, and we're now working on putting in place contract vehicles that would allow departments to host data at the protected level.
Thank you. Representative Capriglione.
Hey there. Hi, everybody. My name is Giovanni Corleone. A little background on myself. I started out life as a programmer. I worked for a company called Cabletron Systems, and then I used to be a semiconductor designer at Lucent Technologies. Somehow, some way I got elected, and now I'm a member of the Texas House, one of the 150 State House members. I'm in my third session right now. I serve on a bunch of different committees. I'm the subcommittee chair for the Appropriations Committee, where I look at government contracts, IT contracts, procurement, and so on. I've also just been appointed the chairman for the Select House Committee on Cybersecurity. So I've been working kind of on a lot of different technology, cloud computing, education-related programs inside of the state. When you look at the state and where it's just been about 6 or 7 years ago before they first started to look at cloud as an option to be able to work on all of the massive amounts of data that the state of Texas generates and collects. But we've moved forward from that time, and last session I worked on a bill along with Senator Jane Nelson, and so I was the House sponsor for that. And what we did effectively was say, kind of like what you're talking about, we went from, hey, agencies, you can look at cloud computing as an option to you should look at cloud computing as an option. And so what that's meant, I think by the end of this year, Texas will release the biggest public sector contract when it comes to cloud services. So we're, I think, moving in the right direction. I look forward to not only talking here, but listening to you all as what other things Texas should be doing.
Thank you. Andrew?
Hi everyone, I'm Andrew Grant. I'm Chief Executive of Aylesbury Vale District Council, which was just featured in the keynote address. So I'm a Chief Exec. A dirty little secret, I know nothing about computing or technology or Lambda or any of those words. I run a local authority or a municipality of about 420 staff, providing key basic services to about 200,000 population, about 40 miles northwest from London. So it's a beautiful area, rural and urban, feeding into London, so a lot of businesses and community, a fairly wealthy area. We, in your parlance, adopted a cloud-first policy in 2010. We're the first local authority in the UK to go into Amazon Web Services en bloc, assisted by Arcus Global. But my real policy is a customer-first policy. Cloud helps you scale and meet customer needs and bespoke those needs in the home. And by 2013, we'd gone into the cloud, but it's gone from there. It's just a platform for what you want to do to maximize customer value. And actually just stepping into the cloud is just the first step. It's what you do with it later, which we can come on to. And so really, I'm at the kind of humanizing what the computer technology can do. And I think that's really where the debate should be.
Thank you.
And working very closely with my elected representatives on the local area in partnership.
Excellent.
Okay, good afternoon. My name is Fabian Tomasetti. I am from Republic of Argentina. I work in the Ministry of Modernization, and I am in charge of an office that deals with the ITC license and purchase for the government, for the federal government. In this position, we started doing a survey around the infrastructures, the IT infrastructure of our main government agencies. And well, we realized that our government was working as a silos with a CapEx-oriented mechanism, not sharing information, not sharing infrastructure, not using cloud, not using other kind of services that will allow them to improve their services. So at the same time, we already have a big data center, a big tier 3 data center that was almost empty at that moment. So we decided the first move of trying to share this infrastructure with everybody and making the things more standardized and more efficient. We tried to use private cloud services for the agencies also, with the design and distribute collaborations products. And that's gone well, but we realized that the pace that we can improve to that offering was not so agile, and it was not as quick as we need to make a real transformation. So we start looking at the end of the last year, first of all, what other governments were doing in that sense and how they can reduce the gap for the digital transformation. And we definitely understood that the use of the cloud in the different manners is the way. So we launched this year policies for the governments. They are based in a code of good practices, where the cloud first is one of the good practices we are empowering. We recognize that the hybrid solution is the model that probably we can keep on going for a while, especially because we need to face some cultural changes in our people and our teams. But we are very open, and we are promoting to use the cloud as the first option. Also, we are trying to facilitate to the agencies the mechanism to do the procurement, because it's one of the challenges we have as a government to be very agile on trying to get this quicker. So this is the move where we are. So,
Excellent. Thank you. The state of Texas and Aylesbury Vale District Council are sort of more mature in their cloud-first policies. Can both of you speak a little bit to the benefits of cloud that made you want to pursue a cloud-first policy in the first place?
Well, I mean, it's very practical that on the operational level, it's led to, it basically untethers you from all the premise-related, asset-related ways that organizations have formulated itself over 100, 120 years of local government. Because, I mean, we were needing to move offices at the time. So what started as a practical application to not lock into further, server farms in, the coldest room that you could possibly make on Earth and have specialists that only you had and building computers, we were able to lift ourselves out of that and concentrate on customer service, for which we needed to have people in the field, possibly in the office, or at home. And in all rounds, it makes you more resilient, it makes you more agile, and it reduces your expenditure. I know there's a sort of concern about IT staff. That wasn't our main concern. It was about customer fulfillment at the point of the journey. It's become more of a policy. At the time, I think we did it for the operational reasons, and we took. I think of the 18 million pounds, I don't know what that's in dollars, of the last 10 years that we've taken out in efficiency or income generation, which is another aspect that we're trying to explore, not just taxation, but how to generate subscription income for value-added services. But at least 15 to 20%, possibly more, 30% has been because of the cloud. It's not because of the fewer IT staff you have, and some of those actually turned themselves into project management staff to help the transition. Some went because they were used to fixing computers. Others we retrained. But I think it's in the reduction in the asset footprint you need, it's deploying your staff, where your customers are, and reducing the infrastructure in more than just literal sense, but in the way the organization works. And that's worth millions upon millions. And that's the liberation of cloud. And that's perhaps something we didn't see until we just started and see where we got to. Now, we've got a maturity to see that that's actually a policy, not just something you're operational led and iterating each year, every year. You're trying to impose the self-imposed disruption to break through to a new platform. So I think it's something we've benefited from financially, organizationally, and most importantly, culturally. And that's something that, we're now helping other councils with their culture transition, because in the end, culture eats strategy for breakfast, which isn't my phrase, but I like to repeat that. I don't know, it was a famous phrase, but it's absolutely true.
Sure. Well, I think for Texas, so the interesting thing about how we do it is we only come in every 2 years, right? So we'll go and we try and get as much as we've done in the interim before we go. So a lot of what we're trying to do during the interim is trying to think about what improvements we can make and know that we effectively only have one bite at the apple before we have to come back in 2 years. If you look at this cloud bill that we worked on last session, it was about security, it was about efficiency, but it went through the Appropriations Committee, because a lot of the focus for us in the Texas legislature is making sure that we can find a way to save money. Maybe that's reducing capital expenditures and moving that over to operating expenses, but a lot of what we're looking to is efficiency, not just in dollars, but in terms of productivity as well. I mean, one of the things that we looked at, for instance, is we have elections, right? Something that's near and dear to at least my heart and others, but we have these elections and they're there and they seem like they're always going on, but if you think about it, they're only really doing it 4 or 5 times a year. In the meantime, the Secretary of State has to create a whole entire infrastructure, has all this legacy equipment that's effectively just sitting there waiting for the next 2 weeks of pandemonium. And we saw that there was a lot of opportunities inside of our state and our 200 plus agencies where we could use the cloud for things like that. So that's been part of the impetus, and I think that if you look, we're now at only 6% is the latest number. 6% of our total computing, if you could put that as a metric, is now in the cloud. But I think our goal is to try in the next 5 to 10 years get that up to 40 to 50%.
And as policymakers are dealing with a lot during the legislative session and may not have, a background in technology or IT, what are some of the best messages that you thought resonated really well with them?
So the best messages, and if you think about it, we'll pass maybe 2,000 bills, mostly in a 3-week time period, right? So your timeshare is very, very small, and so you do have to think of a message very quickly and effectively that'll say why a legislator should support you on that. I would say for half the members, it's about, hey, this is going to save money, just sign up on it, you'll be good. But what I'm seeing more now is it's about security. Okay, this is going to help Texas protect private users' information. It's going to go and put something up where we could be confident that when there is an attack, a cyber attack, or if there's just a virus or whatever it is, that our constituents' information and our government's information is going to be safe and secure. So to me, today, the security message is an important message for at least other legislators.
Absolutely.
I think I would say, security is an obvious one. Teresa said, now it's why you would do this, not just because the CIA are in. It's because, I can't find the highest level security expert for my council and the next council and the next council. We can all share the best that Amazon or can provide. There's secure, but to me, it's becoming something that you're not tethering your staff to a PC at a desk that only they can occupy. That their crumbs are in the keyboard. It's actually making the whole place turn inside out towards your customer, not to fulfill an organizational silos and all the tropes and memes that go around, the politics and being a chief executive and who's in my camp and who's not. And if you're more transparent to your customers, you're more electable. I'm the returning officer in the UK for people like yourself. Right. So I have to get up every, 4 years in our case, and national elections. And people have to say, well, who are you? Why are you our representative? And it really has to be done back to customer value. And I think the cloud gives your people more productivity, which people see as better value for their tax dollars. And that creates trust and credibility in their local administrations or national administrations, and that builds goodwill in the community. And I think, services cannot be provided by the old business model of local government. You can't just beg for more tax dollars because, our case in Texas is better than the one in, Virginia. You have to try and get off of that. And in UK, we haven't really recovered from austerity. I think you got over it in about 6 months. We're still living with it 12 years later. But it's probably the best thing that ever happened to us because it made us think of the impossible and change the business model. And cloud is just the first start. In 10 years' time, we went in all in and then just burning through the legacy as we go, rather than just let's see how it goes. Because if you're not in, you're going to be dead if you don't. Dead, reputationally or literally. Financially, if you're in a business, you'd already be, George Colony speaks at Dreamforce. If you look at the video Forrester research, most of the audience are looking at, how customers are already ahead of you. You said most of you are already dead, but you don't know it. It's because the businesses, in the private sector case, it's being hollowed out. Those that are not tracking their customer are already, look at the apps they're using. They're threading things together to make their day a better day. They're not waiting for you to give the decision that they're looking for. They're just finding a way to get around you. If you can do that with them, then electorally it's got to be better.
We've heard a little bit about the benefits of moving to a cloud-first policy, but I'd like to hear from Scott about some of the challenges in moving that direction from Canada's perspective.
I don't think I'd be surprising anyone if I talked about security, procurement, culture, skills. I think in terms for us for security, we're used to an environment where we buy the components, we engineer it together, we assess it, we operate it. So moving to using industry certifications like SOC 2 and ISO was quite a leap. We're quite lucky. We have a really great group of cybersecurity experts. In fact, a particular colleague of mine, she really led a lot of work around challenging status quo. We call her, she's our cloud ninja. She's always in the room asking, why can't we do this? Why can't? Go back, this might be how we do it today, but what threat were we trying to mitigate against? And maybe there's other ways of doing that. But that also kind of goes into the skills as well. You know, our ability to adopt cloud, I think as we're finding out quite quickly as we get past things like security and procurement, is our ability to scale is directly tied to our workforce's ability to adopt the skills. These are very secure environments, very secure platforms, but without the right skills, we won't get it right. And so there's a lot of work to do there and a lot of work around culture as well.
Fabian, did you experience the same transition in Argentina?
Yeah, I think that we have an enormous opportunity to reduce the gap in terms of the kind of services that we can deliver in an agile way. One problem in the government administration is there are processes for purchasing or for procuring the infrastructure or the services, and also is the people, how trained is your people, how skilled is your people. So there is a gap right now in this sense, and we think that using the cloud will allow us to move quicker and reduce this gap in fewer time. Also, there is of course, there is innovation opportunities or cost reductions that we also take care, especially because the OpEx model that the cloud services permits in terms of a government that need to invest a lot of things in many other areas is a good attraction to go in that move.
Absolutely. We've heard a lot of discussion about the impact and the change in culture. Can you talk a little bit about your experience in changing the culture in a cloud-first environment?
Yeah, well, the culture, for instance, I think that the cloud is allowing us to go more easily to agile environments or technologies like DevOps or containers to develop services or applications, allows our forces, the IT forces, to have new tools to make provide the services or the services we need to provide to the citizens, to the other agencies in a more efficient way. So the culture comes in that way. We think that having the possibility to pick that services or that resources that already there and use to focus on our business, it will be more easy for our people to be oriented on the service-oriented way and improve the cultural change. Avoid working as a silo, like the way we saw or we realized when we did the survey, and trying to work more collaborative way. That's the idea.
I definitely agree with that there was a point where we needed to abolish the silos, and that wasn't going to happen by people agreeing to it and then going back to their silos, professional stacks. If you think of a customer-first policy, it's fulfilling the customer and then dragooning all the skills to meet that. So I think we chose a day in January a few years ago where we were just going to move to an experimental, grouping, and everyone just took what they had and went to the area where their new mission was going to be announced. Had we waited for the silos to wait or the senior leaders in each one to agree, cloud allowed us to, because we weren't linked to any particular place you worked, we could say you assemble here on just after Christmas and you will get a new mission, but you will keep all the baggage until you've worked through it. So you don't have to wait to have the perfect form of this. You can experiment quickly and roll back if it doesn't work. You can deploy in different places physically or, say, culturally, and you can work through things at a pace and a scale that you probably would never have chosen, particularly where your legacy systems are telling you, sorry, if you can't actually press that button and anything will work. It's not your data, and we'll tell you when you can do it. And as the chap from the CIA said earlier, you don't want to just create a cloud version of your legacy system, because that's holding you back. You've got to tell it what you want to do for your own needs and your citizens' needs.
And Scott, did you have any comments on the shift in culture? in a cloud-first environment?
Yeah, I don't think we're done. Like, there's still a lot of apprehension. In 2011, we consolidated the delivery of IT infrastructure under one federal department, and I think certainly there's still a lot of apprehension that this is somehow going to lead to job loss, and that's certainly not what it's about. It's really, we have a lot of people focused on managing aging assets, the life cycle of those assets, at a time when citizens are demanding digital services. And so we're using those valuable IT professionals to do asset management when it should be really about how do we use the services that are already there and deliver them to Canadians. So I think, we certainly had to address that, and I also think, but on the other side, we've seen developers get very excited about this, right? They've got tools that they've only ever dreamed about, and they cost 10 cents to start. In fact, what we've seen is an evolution of application developers becoming stack developers, so now going right down to the infrastructure level. So roles are changing. That's causing a lot of apprehension in the IT community. We see business getting very excited that they now get SaaS tools that, before you had to go through a year-long process to get hardware and software, and now, you're instantly turning this on. We can do proof of concepts because this is all on-demand services we couldn't do before. So we got a long way to go. There's certainly a lot of barriers to overcome, but I think culture is starting to shift.
And what do you think would be the practical sort of considerations to think about as we create a new workforce with new skill sets in a cloud environment? What kinds of ways should we be upskilling those workers?
I think it's definitely giving them the experience and the opportunity. It's not, we have a lot of people, I think companies like Amazon have helped us by providing educational events, but then, those people need to go back to their desk and actually use what they learn. So I think that kind of combination of education and experience and actually trying it can be a little overwhelming at first. But actually getting in there to do it, I think that's really helping people pick up those skills. And we have leaders in the government of Canada, and we have people still, in their mind, cloud is just something they will never do. So I think, everyone's on a different maturity curve in the government of Canada right now.
Yes, I think that I agree with him in terms of the training, but also the tools are necessary. The good cases and the good examples where the people realize real cases that works in a timely fashion or with good results, with low cost, that will improve the adoption and the use of the cloud services. Another important term for us, at least in our government environment, is to provide a mechanism for them to pick up those services. Because if we train a lot, but then there is a gap between the services and the people wanting to use them, there is a frustration also, and it doesn't grow at the speed that we want. So this is also important, to provide the mechanism to purchase or to deliver epochs or develop environments or things like this.
And when you think, I guess to the entire group, when you think about your next step on the cloud journey in your respective governments, do you think that there are more policy changes necessary or even just IT policy changes needed?
Better ask a politician.
Okay, yes. Politician, my favorite. Yeah, I think there are. I mean, we look at, for instance, something we were talking about before, which is the federal government did their version of the Modernization Act, right? It is very difficult during the appropriations process, especially when you don't know 2 years ahead of time how much money you're going to have, for people to come in and say, hey, I want this, 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 and that, and those become special items that become easy for us to say, nope, you get none of those items, right? So looking at things like what Congress passed here and bringing that to the state of Texas, I think allows us to create something that's long-lasting, gives agencies and IT departments the ability to look for those efficiencies and then use those cost savings to go and make their own decisions about the best use of those new dollars, whether it's going more on the cloud, finding some new training to help get their their employees on board or something. And I think for me, that's one of my big policy items that I'm going to be working for, is to stop coming to us, the legislature, to say, hey, can we have this gadget, and just say, well, you know what, let's do an incentive here where if you save the taxpayers' dollars, you'll get to use some of it.
I think the policy arena
You can use that, by the way.
I will use that. I won't tell him that you told me.
Okay.
I think it has to become more policy-led, because if you just iterate away from people saying, well, it's just too difficult for me, and we're cloud first, but you go first, so that if you fail, I don't have to fail. You don't open up, the opportunity for citizens to get services where in the citizen space in real time, not waiting for you as the organization to serve this up. This isn't about the organizations I'm not an IT professional. I'm the chief executive of the whole organization, trying to deploy the best for citizens. If they don't get what we do, there is no IT department, there's no me, there's nothing. So we've got to stop being internally focused. And I actually is mine, this one. I haven't borrowed it from Google. But I think IT stands for institutional technology. Just a faster spreadsheet is nothing to do with citizens saying, I need to get my kids to school, I need to get to work, I want to learn this. That's their day. They're voting for you. You're employing me and all of us in central government. I think there needs to be more consistency. I think in the UK, the figure's gone from only 10% of local authorities are using the cloud, or even having more than one application in the cloud. And I think that hasn't gone much better than about another 10% than last year. Governments in different, you get the Home Office or the vehicle registration is massively using it, and another department not using it. So you can't roll out citizen platforms like Verify. Am I the Andrew Grant, or am I a Andrew Grant? We don't have ID cards here in the UK. So in order to help onboarding you for getting your car registered or your benefits, that's got to be a policy-led thing. And I think, legislators like yourself will need to have this idea as how they liberate citizens to have a better day, a more efficient day, not about would my team get upset if we did this. They're irrelevant to our economy's growing. And yes, actually, it's easier for us because I've got happier staff, because when they say, can we do this? Because the citizens are asking for it. We could probably, as we've heard earlier, roll that out in minutes, equivalent to the old days of procuring. So frameworks can get you there, but the cloud is a platform for what you want to do next. Not even getting on the platform means you're not even on the train going to where your customers have already left. They're already 2 stops down. And I think that's what the commercial world's telling you about consumer technology is serving up offers that people want in their day. And I think local government is way behind. And if they have to explain what's happening with their tax dollars, they're going to compare it to the last time they went to the best experience in their life was, I saw a presentation in the UK by a guy that actually was an entertainer at Disney. And he was talking about customer relationships. And he said, when people go into your local hospital, in the UK, NHS hospital, they're not comparing waiting 4 hours in A&E with the other hospital where it's only 3.5 hours in accidents and emergency. It's just a long wait. They're comparing it to the best department store they've been in that week where the service was great. And yes, they're different services, but that's citizens comparing it with the best that they could get, not the least worst bit of hospital service they've ever had, because that's still no good. If it's 3 hours longer than you want to wait, that citizen's upset. And that's something we've just got to get over ourselves and onto the platform in technical terms, and then build services like our My Account and personalize your service from there on. And that's what, if you like, the private sector's done because it's had to, because there's a shareholder value in it. If we interpreted shareholder value as customer value, be it, we like this government, we don't, we like, Giovanni, we don't like this guy or woman, then it gives people choice and power, and it democratizes what they're buying. If we just think it's our problem, we don't want to give it, we don't want this because my career is going to change, who cares? My citizens don't care if I think that's a personal affront to my career. They say, we'll just get a new chief exec.
Sure. My answer was going to be different, but he's kind of convinced me otherwise now. I think for us, we just published Cloud First, and it's a bit like the rudder on a large cargo ship. So we swung the rudder, but it's going to take miles before that ship starts to turn. And I think the work that we need to do now is making sure the investments that are being made in IT are aligned to that policy. And we get a lot of cloud washing today, so people will come in and say, yeah, I'm doing something in cloud, and kind of look under the covers and say, well, that's not cloud, really. So we have a lot of education to do, and we have a lot of redirection of investments. And that's a lot of hard work because people have a certain mindset in the way they've done it. But now it's really taking that policy and making sure that our investments are aligned to that.
Yes, I think that we have to leave the rules very simple and straightforward. No? For instance, the cloud first policy as a mandatory issue or preferable option is a good example. In our case, we have the opportunity to review every new project or an expansion of a project of a TCI that any agency wants to deploy in their infrastructure. So there is a check and balance where they promote that projects and where we can review with them, and that's the idea, is to work in advisory manner with them just to ensure that this project is sustainable in the time and they are using the cloud computer as the first choice. We think that, as I mentioned before, is part of the cultural change we need to run together because if they don't understand the main purposes or the lot of advantages it has, it's difficult they catch up and continue going that direction. So keep it simple and trying to do a continued advisory and working together in making the move.
That actually is a great segue to my next question, which how can AWS and other cloud providers help instill confidence in other organizations to move to the cloud?
Just tell them the CIA's on it.
I'll add to that, though, because I think that is one of the big resistances, right? We have a lot of what we would call regulated data, right, or restricted data. And that's things like background checks, it's things related to investigations, maybe it's healthcare, maybe it's personal information like social security numbers and birth dates and so on. And so I think people will generally put those into two types of buckets, which is one, hey, this is an app, it doesn't matter if it doesn't work or if someone takes it or whatever, and so they feel more comfortable with that. But there is a little bit of just, hey, this is information I definitely don't want to leave my site, even if realize really where the information is. And that's what I've seen at some of the agencies in terms of that's the confidence that's needed, is that you'll be okay taking this information and putting it out there. And then for people in the politics world is, okay, who's going to get blamed if it doesn't, right? Is it easier to go and say, well, this was this agency and it was their job to do it versus, hey, we signed off on the contract to go send it somewhere else. So I think the reassurance that this information is critical and more secure is the number one focus, to try and get more of that stuff out there.
I think Amazon would stake its reputation on if it failed, it'd fail us, all of us. But we could all, there's probably more like, I think in the UK we had the WannaCry virus. Well, I think we all did.
We all did.
And particularly the NHS, our health service. And it exposed the fact that local on-premise, it depends on which hospital you went to. Some of them hadn't even upgraded from, Windows something or other, because someone hadn't, on their watch, done that, and exposed the weakness of, if you think you're already secure on-premise, then, that you're probably not. If you have an event that means you would have to mirror an office, which you can't afford, the cloud gives you the ability to distribute that data, get the security checks that you obviously want, and Amazon have got all the reputationally to put all that investment in that I can't do with the skill sets that might not be available locally. And there's probably more chance of personal information being left on a photocopier or on the train I mean, I think there's probably something like 4,000 incidents of civil servants leaving a briefcase on the train in London. More likely, in fact, there's been exposés of ministers going into Downing Street with a plan of action that was on the top of their briefcase. And of course, the paparazzi see that with a long range, and that information is more likely to get out that way through human error than it would be through the cloud. Much though that is important that is secure, and Amazon's reputation is geared to putting trillions into that, much more than I could put in my own little way. And I think there's another statistic that local government in England is still most of it's working with software and systems updated that was procured between 1988 and 2003. Well, even my eldest kids, in the late 80s. You know, that's 2 or 3 generations away from. How is that? We should be ashamed of that, because however much the companies feel that the on-premise is absolutely, it's not scalable, and it doesn't fit the way citizens want to have their information secure, but bespoke and tailored to their needs. If we said, well, can you come back on Wednesday because we've got a 2-year procurement to work out before we can give you that information, it doesn't fly politically with a small and big P.
Yes, we think that the security is a shared responsibility. So both parties have to take care about their pieces, no? The provider in this case, but also the agencies, the organization has to put in place the rules, the mechanism, the access codes, and who access and who not. So it's something that we have to take care and not release everything to the cloud provider. Another myth is that almost any government, 80%, 70, 90% of the information should be public. So this is another issue that everybody says, okay, well, what about privacy? What about security, the top secret information? That's true. There is a lot of information we have to take care and put in a vault and in a very care mode. But again, there are many cases where we can put the information in public with a shared responsibility, of course, taking care of the data protection and all the main things. But we can rule this environment without problems. But we have to take care about each responsibility. This is what we think.
We've got about 7 minutes left. If there's any questions from the audience, there are microphones right there in the middle of the room. You could pose to the panel. Yes. Yes.
Good afternoon. This is very interesting, and thank you for being here. We're having conversations with a number of governments around the world about this topic. You already did the journey. You're well ahead. What would be your advice to a CIO or person in your roles who's just starting to look at this? What were the lessons learned and the best advice that you can provide them?
Drink heavily. You're trying to change the status quo, and you're going up against the status quo, and you have to be resilient, and you have to be confident that you're doing the right thing. And there's an entrenched status quo who say you can't do that. You're changing it. Even a few weeks ago, I was challenging an executive's investments, IT investments, and this person has started saying, well, your cloud first is gobbledygook, it's dogma, it's just, you have to be confident that you're going in the right direction. And in your individual government, you might seem alone, but when you come to a place like this and you see, your peers who are all going the same direction, it builds confidence. So I guess that would be my advice.
I would say don't start with the question, is cloud the solution? Start with where do you want to go with your business and your mission, as you call it here, and how would you do that if you didn't have cloud to allow you to? It may be that you don't need. In fact, if you can achieve that mission with a piece of paper and a pen, do that. Keep it simple. don't just do it because everyone's doing it. Do it because you think the outcome you want politically or operationally or whatever you're doing, what sort of services you're doing, cannot be done with the scale of demands that are rising in the world, your assets getting more expensive, your people are most expensive. You probably couldn't do that unless you adopted at least some cloud solutions and possibly all in the cloud, and start small and go from there. Just start.
I should recommend start right now going to the public cloud. I should recommend also think about the hybrid model. Probably there is an environment that fits better for their reality, especially when you have to run the cultural gap and leave the people to be trained in the skill to understand much better which is the best environment to deploy their business or their infrastructure to focus on the business that we have as a government, no? Goes for the government, so to the citizens or to the other agencies, and not to build infrastructure, in other words. That's my advice.
It looks like we have one more question.
Hi, this has been a very interesting talk. There was an article a number of years ago. I don't know how serious the article was, but there was a joke that the infrastructure of AWS was getting to a point that so much reliability was on it, both from a private sector standpoint as well as a public sector standpoint, that it may become prudent to start now physically guarding them with military assets and things like that. I was just curious, as people from the government, if you guys agree with that sentiment, and if so, what would that look like?
You mean like creating physical security around those?
Right, yes.
Okay. Yeah, I think people look at it, I mean, a lot of the conversations we've been having, obviously, with cybersecurity is more virtual attacks and more cyber attacks. But if you go to our internal data centers, you'll see it's very well protected. Because a lot of what we're seeing is actually, kind of to your point, it's not even cyber, it's more social attacks and more maybe people that work for your organization or from the outside. I just passed a law to create a depository, a gold and silver depository for the state of Texas, and there's a ton of security over that too. So maybe we could put some of our data center stuff in there too. So.
I think that seems to be a possible solution if that was the only way you had to do it. But I'm told that there's serverless technologies, there's blockchain where information is actually everywhere and nowhere, baby. And so what are you guarding? You're guarding, it won't be actually you can see on Google Earth that the data center's just off the coast of somewhere with a lot of water and, somewhere remote. Those are possible targets. But if the information is on millions of computers that could be then reaggregated with a sort of a blockchain type of sort of date stamp of where that is, that in itself is hard to manage, but it's much harder for anyone to then pick one particular site. So I think already the industry is moving on and thinking, well, what if we don't need these computers? What if we could put it in a more ethereal way? I don't know how. I mean, people cleverer than Amazon will work that out, or the son of Amazon or the daughter of Amazon will work that out, where we won't put those things in such, as you say, a visceral, literal place. It will be in the place, but it won't be off the coast of somewhere that we can't mention because you might go there and blow it up.
Well, I know we could chat about this for a long time, but we are at time, and I want to thank our panelists so much for joining us for the conversation today.
Thank you.